Capitol, to the chamber of the House of Representatives, where Governor Asa Hutchinson will address a joint session of the General Assembly. It is the last regular session of Mr. Hutchinson's tenure, which by constitutional mandate ends in January 2023. So, absent any special sessions of the legislature, emergency sessions as they're sometimes called, it's the governor's last opportunity to shape public policy in a truly meaningful way. His fellow Republicans hold supermajorities in both House and Senate, but that doesn't necessarily mean smooth sailing for the administration, for any administration. We're joined this hour by former Speaker Jeremy Gillum, now with the University of Central Arkansas. Mr. Speaker, welcome back. We were here a couple of years ago on this occasion, opening of a General Assembly.
Yes, sir. It's exciting times. Appreciate the invitation to come back today.
This was this is the 93rd General Assembly, regular session, and when it comes to the obligations of a legislature, really there's nothing in second place. Writing a budget is the most important thing it's got to do. That comes a little bit later in the session, but the work begins very early.
Yes, sir. I think you've already seen a good number of the appropriation bills that have been filed prior to the session, several even filed yesterday. And so I think they're going to be a little bit more focused on efficiency on those budget appropriations this session, maybe more so than in sessions past because of the circumstances they find themselves in, having a session in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, COVID hangs over the Capitol as it hangs over practically every other part of life in Arkansas, indeed around the country, across the world.
It does, and they've taken extraordinary measures for safety, both for the general public and for the members themselves, to be able to conduct this session. And so I think you saw that yesterday and how the tone of both the Speaker and the Senate President presented kind of their vision for the session to their members in their respective chambers is getting in, being efficient, let's do the people's business, and exit as orderly as they can from the session, given the dynamics they're working with.
Well, they're supposed to meet they have to meet for 60 days, but they haven't done that in quite a few. Let's go to the floor if we can now, the House. Dr. Rex Horn, the chaplain, formerly retired, I think now, the chaplain or pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church in Little Rock, and also president of Ouachita Baptist University, I believe.
I think so.
In His name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Members, please indicate your presence by pushing your yellow present button. Prepare the machine, Mr. Clerk. Cast of the ballot, Mr. Clerk. With 99 members present, the chair sees a quorum. Are there any requests for leave? Representative McElroy, for what purpose?
Leave for Representative McGee.
Is leave granted for Representative McGee? So noted. Representative Frederick Love moves we dispense with the reading of the previous day's journal. Without objection, so ordered. Are there reports from select committees? Are there reports from standing committees? Is there any unfinished business? Are there any executive communications? Mr. Clerk, please read House Concurrent Resolution 1006.
House Concurrent Resolution 1006 by Representative Shepard, providing for recess of 4 or more consecutive days of the House of Representatives and the Senate of the 93rd General Assembly.
Representative Wing, you're recognized to explain the resolution.
All dressed up and nowhere to go. House Concurrent Resolution 1006 is identical to the recess motions that we have at the beginning of each session. Of course, rules state that any time we are in recess longer than 3 days, we need permission from the other chamber. This, however, takes an additional step due to COVID, which allows the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate to set some additional recesses just in case of COVID emergencies. Deadlines could be extended for the filing and consideration of scope of practice legislation, the filing of proposed constitutional amendments, and the filing of appropriations bills. Other than that, it's the exact same that we do in every session. Appreciate a good vote.
Representative Wing has explained the resolution. Would anyone like to speak against the resolution? Would anyone like to speak for the resolution? Representative Wing is closed for the resolution. The question before the House is the adoption of House Concurrent Resolution 1006. Prepare the machine, Mr. Clerk. Has everyone voted? Cast up the ballot, Mr. Clerk. By a vote of 94 yeas, 0 nay, and 0 present, the resolution has been adopted. Morning hour has ended. Mr. Clerk, please read House Bill 1001.
House Bill 1001 by Representative Shepard, an act for the Arkansas House of Representatives of the 93rd General Assembly appropriation for the 2020 and 2021 fiscal year.
Representative Wing, you're recognized to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1001 is identical to the appropriations bills that we pass at the beginning of each session, just to take care of the financial needs as we go about our session. Appreciate a good vote.
Representative Wing has explained the bill. Would anyone like to speak against the bill? Would anyone like to speak for the bill? Representative Wing is closed for the bill. The question before the House is the passage of House Bill 1001. Prepare the machine, Mr. Clerk.
And back in the Arkansas PBS studios with former Speaker Jeremy Gillum. Mr. Speaker, again, we're back. What we're seeing right now on the floor of the House is the beginning of every session. There are a few little housekeeping things, some ritual to attend to, and you got to pay the bills, too.
Yes, sir. They've got to get the foundation laid so they can move on to the committees and the language, the substantive bills and the debates and everything that's going to come about after today. So it's the housekeeping is always got to be done at the beginning of the session.
Yeah, and it was interesting, too. I think the gentleman from North Little Rock who was handling a couple of those pro forma bills up there we saw just a moment ago, Carlton Wing. Carlton, I think, or Mr. Wing, in his second or third term now. One of two members, the other a Democrat, who came in on razor-thin margins this time.
Yes, and I think, anytime you've got, a presidential election year, you're going to have increases in voter turnout, and it's going to be in different forms as far as the turnout of the state. And Pulaski County definitely saw some turnout there, and we saw a lot of drama from that between the mail-in voting, the absentee voting coming in this time, and the way some things were handled there at the Election Commission and through some of the staff, and did create some drama after the fact as well. And so you've got two members that are coming in knowing that they've got split districts, and so we'll see how that plays out with the session for those two individuals.
Yeah, Mr. As we mentioned, Mr. Wing, a Republican. The other, we had a Republican member. This is kind of unusual. A Republican member unseated by a Democrat this time. Ashley Hudson, Mr. Savillo of his district, mostly in West Little Rock.
Yes, sir.
Unseated by a very thin margin. Went through the administrative appeals process, State Claims Committee.
It did, and which was unusual. You know, to have an election contested and to go that route. But yesterday we saw that, I mean, everything flowed and everybody was seated, you know, like normal. And so I think they've kind of ready to turn the page on the election from that standpoint. I know they're going to be looking at some reforms and things as a body, both in the Senate and the House, as far as moving forward. Hopefully, so those issues that came about won't be repeated.
Yeah, we will go back to the floor in just a moment. Right now, I believe, I don't have an image of the House in front of me right now, but with more housekeeping matters, and there'll be a recess while a committee appointed by the Speaker will go to fetch the governor and bring him back for his address to the General Assembly.
Yes, and it'll be a little different this time because there won't be a physical presence with the Senate in the House chambers for the joint session as normal. So I think the Senate and the constitutional officers, the Supreme Court will all be joining virtually due to the COVID restrictions. So it'll have a little different feel for the room, probably for the governor as he delivers his remarks. And
you can see, the viewer can see from our earlier shots on the floor, the members are separated from one another on three sides by, as is the staff, by these plexiglass security barriers.
That will make it quite a bit different, too, from the camaraderie even among the members in the chambers, as far as how they communicate with their seatmates and with each other. So it'll take them a little time to get used to that, but I think they will. I think they'll get their kind of bearings here fairly quickly and be able to move forward, and I think in a really good fashion.
Yeah. Jeremy, that camaraderie, that fraternity, the socialization, if you will, the one-on-one contact among legislators, House and Senate, so crucial to moving a session forward.
It is, and especially, I think it's going to be...
Relationships really matter.
It does, and I think in the time that we're commencing this session, when you look at where we're at as a state and a nation, I think that camaraderie is going to be extremely vital for the institutions themselves, the Senate and the House, to be able to operate, but then even able to function together and in conjunction with the governor. And so it's one of the things that really has made Arkansas different. And when you look at the polarization in other state legislatures around the nation, Arkansas has continually ranked as one of the best as far as remaining a cohesive, functional body. And so that's going to be a little different this time because of the precautions that have to be taken for everyone's safety. But I'm confident that the Speaker and the Senate President are going to find ways to bring everybody together and to try to make sure that as best as possible that camaraderie still exists.
Well, that's certainly been the announced goal of Speaker Shepard and President Hickey, Jimmy Hickey of Texarkana, on the Senate side. But let me ask this. Your view on this. I mean, it has always in the Arkansas General Assembly, it's been less party than it has been ideology, perhaps, and some other factors as well. But these are pretty fevered political times we're in, Jeremy Gillum. Do you fear that could shape in a negative way this session?
I think it's always a possibility anytime that you commence a session like this. But I really think that at the end of the day, and having served with a great majority of the men and women that make up the Senate and the House, knowing them personally, regardless of how passionate they may get at times, they're there for the right reason. and several of them that have just came in, I have the privilege of knowing as well. And so I really feel like they're going to be able to keep that at bay. I think there's going to be times in the session that some of those things will creep in.
Always are.
But I really do think overall that they're going to be able to keep that at bay, stay focused on the task at hand. And I think you're going to see, yes, definitely some divisions that will come about from some ideology and from geography. Which has always been the case. You know, you've got urban districts that want certain things and rural districts that want other things, and so you'll see some different alliances kind of come about between Democrats and Republicans based on geography as well. But I really do think that at the end of the day, they're going to be able to stay focused and put the state forward and not let the partisan divisions and some of the toxicity that's existed outside of Arkansas to dominate. Not saying it won't show up from time to time, but I don't think it will dominate the session.
Well, let's talk for a second about that rural-urban tension or split as it is. Two trends in the past decade that were already in place have been really accelerated since the last congressional reapportionment, and that is, well, in the last decade. And that is the continued loss of population in what is now the 1st Congressional District, East Arkansas and South Arkansas. Both have just hemorrhaged population. Now there are population centers, for example, in Northeast Arkansas, Jonesboro, Paragould, that SMSA, thriving, you know. Housing prices going up, you know, traffic problems up there. But on the whole, the growth has been in Northwest Arkansas. We could have a 3rd Congressional District, it seems like, that's pretty small.
Very well could be, and I think that's.
And I guess what forgive me, I guess what I'm getting at or bringing up was that one of the jobs of this General Assembly will be to redraw congressional district lines.
Yes, and having been a part of that a decade ago and that process, I'm familiar with how it will go and how it will color some things even throughout the session.
Yeah.
Just from a standpoint of everybody kind of having that in the back of their mind, knowing that once those numbers come in, they're really going to have to dive in them. So, you know, and I think this time around, the numbers are going to dictate a lot of how that goes. You know, we did see, you know, split county last time.
First time ever, as I recall.
And this time around, you may see several that have to be done that way because of that geographical imbalance that Northwest Arkansas, that population shift is just, that explosion there has created. So it's going to be a very interesting dynamic, and it very well may be that has to come in the summer. There have been delays reported out of Washington on getting those numbers out to the states, and so it may be something that they are not able to deal with in the normal confines of the session, even,
regular session,
depending on how quick Washington can get them the numbers.
What else are you looking for in this session? Should we be looking for in this session?
Well, I think the governor has made it abundantly clear that hate crimes legislation is going to be something that's going to be a priority for him. He's made, you know, he presented his budget, and so he's kind of laid out some items that he wants to take up when it comes to tax cuts and modifications there, used car sales tax revision, you know, and so there's definitely, you know, that's going to be a part of the discussion. The membership has definitely indicated that they want to look at how the emergency declaration provisions are carried out. And I think from the governor's standpoint, I think he's also wanted to make sure that the healthcare infrastructure is appropriately addressed, and not only just from this pandemic and how we are able to deal with it, but moving forward as well. So, you know, those are some items that I think that everybody is definitely aware of, and they're prepared for the debate. And so they'll run through the committee process, and you'll see probably multiple bills filed in those areas. I think you could definitely, I think you've already seen the hate crimes legislation, for instance, I think dealt with on both ends, kind of mirrored language to see which can make it through first. And so I think you may see that with some other items as well.
Let's go back to health care, if we can, for a second, because the appropriation is going to take 3/4 vote in both chambers to get the appropriation out for the state medical budget, and we're talking about Arkansas Works, the Medicaid expansion in Arkansas. It's been a contentious issue. And Mr. Hutchinson lost a couple of legislative allies in the last General Assembly. You want to predict how that's going to go?
Well, I think Secretary Gillespie and several legislative leaders, as well as some of the administrative staff, have been working on, what path you move forward on and how you move forward. Given the change of administration at the federal level, the waiver process, might go different. So I think you'll see some tweaks, and I haven't seen any draft legislation. I don't think anything's out yet, but just from what you hear in discussions with the members, I definitely think that that they will chart a slightly different path moving forward. And at the end of the day, I think you'll see some good, robust debate as to the merits of that new vision and new program. But I think you'll see some responsible votes as they look at what's best for the state. I don't know that you'll see some of the contention that we saw in the early stages of the discussion of the private option and Arkansas Works.
Well, from your time in the House, it has been a very spirited debate over the years. Well, the Supreme Court now is taking a look at the work requirement, I believe, that enabled, a lot of people believe, enabled Mr. Hutchinson to get the votes he needed to get get the appropriation through 2 years ago, or what now, 4 years ago, I think.
Yes.
And there was been a lot of pushback from the General Assembly since then. So how does that, if you get a negative and adverse ruling from the Supreme Court, how's that going to color that debate?
Well, I think...
Does that just completely redraw the lines of debate?
I think it will with certain members, and there's been a lot more time for study too. So there are members who came in with certain viewpoints, and then looking back now, they've maybe, you never know what those discussions have looked like back home. Certain districts may have changed their minds, and so it's difficult at the outset to just say, okay, well, because certain members are no longer in the General Assembly, that gives you an automatic vote count, because it is a fluid situation. And hospital administrators and staff, I mean, especially in where we're at in the middle of a pandemic, may have a different viewpoint on things, and functionally, we're always learning more. And I think that's one thing that Secretary Gillespie has done a marvelous job of, is to stay in that mode of always looking at maybe a better way of looking at things, or from the functionality standpoint. And so I look for those collaborations that she's had with the legislative leadership and the governor to be able to chart a course that I think can probably get people on board. But it's a fluid process, and we'll see how it goes once the debate starts, and they are able to move forward over the next couple of months. Yeah,
I'm reminded that the immediate past president of the Senate Pro Tem, Senator Hendren from Northwest Arkansas, was early on a vocal opponent of the private option. Arkansas frequently labeled it absolutely fiscally unsustainable, and reversed his position over the years. Wait a minute, let's take another look at this thing.
It happens, and it very well may happen this time. There may be some that don't get on board with it, or the new version of it that may be presented, and they do have to go back and look at it a little bit more. So I think it's definitely going to be something that we'll watch for as the session moves on, because its budget impact is fairly significant. The removal of the program without an appropriate replacement, there would have ramifications across the budget in pretty much every facet.
Smithereens, would it not?
So that's definitely something I think all aspects of the state will be looking at, because it does impact everything. But we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and in terms of fiscal policy, Mr. Hutchinson wants this session to continue what has been really for 2 administrations now, including his predecessor, Mr. Beebe, and that's a gradual reduction in the general revenue pie through tax cuts.
Yes, and he's identified, certain areas, when he presented his budget in the fall, that he wanted to target. And then obviously the General Assembly is going to have their ideas as well. Several bills have already been filed in that regard as well. So I think you'll definitely continue down that road of fiscal path that does shrink the pie. But one thing the governor has made very clear from the outset was that he wanted to make sure that we did things in a responsible way. He didn't want to just cut for the sake of cutting, but he wanted to do it in a very strategic and surgical manner. And he's been very prudent in that regard and been very successful in being able to get the cuts that people wanted, but also in a way that grew the economy. I mean, you've definitely seen some positive traction there and what's been able to be accomplished in job creation. But I think the private sector has responded extremely well to those cuts. And so I think he'll continue to push forward a prudent path and a responsible path and to make sure we don't end up like Kansas.
Yeah, in fact, we've pretty healthy, COVID notwithstanding, is pretty healthy surplus, budget surplus right now.
Yes, and which gives them all the ability to have the discussions that they're going to have this session for what is the best path forward, and so I think you'll see continue that kind of vision and leadership from the governor, and I think you'll see that from the legislative bodies as well.
Yeah, the complaint has been, particularly from the education sector and higher ed as well, is that both K-12, general education, public education, and higher ed has been shorted over the last decade, at least. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think every agency probably feels that way. You know, even outside of education, I'm sure that Department of Human Services and you could go on down the list. I think everybody would like to have more money. I definitely think when it comes to education, you know, there were years in the Beebe administration in which, you know, funding was maybe approached differently than what it has been during the Hutchinson administration, and the General Assembly makeups, you know, reacted differently as well. I definitely think that you've seen a more targeted approach. I think what you'll hear from the governor today is you know, a little bit more of a call on teacher pay. You know, so I think some of that comes down to being subjective in the fact that I think, you know, he's wanted to make sure there was an investment in education, but that it was targeted maybe in a little different way than it was previously, to where it wasn't so much of a blank check that was maybe presented to the K through 12 systems, but more of a, okay, here's money, but we want it spent a certain way. We would like for you to address teacher pay and those, and we saw that 2 years ago. Something I think he'll probably push for again moving forward, and I think there's a lot of legislators that'll be there from a higher ed perspective. You know, I think that there's definitely, you know, a sense that you're going to have to invest at some point, and I think that was something that he led the way on. You know, and we were able to change the productivity model, the funding model to a productivity model, which I think has been good for the state and higher education. So there has been investment. I think everybody would always like for there to be more, and I think that goes across the board. But they're trying to be very methodical and prudent in how they do that. And so now, obviously, I don't think anybody's going to turn money away if they choose to go that direction, and from that standpoint.
General education, of course, is under a constitutional mandate, K-12 education, which has to be fulfilled. So the General Assembly, one of its tasks will be to just go ahead and ratify what's been recommended anyway in terms of funding for K-12, and then fund it.
Yes, and they worked the previous biennium for, you know, on the adequacy report, had a lot of meetings. The chairs of the Senate and House Education Committees, I mean, they met a lot to get that prepared. So we'll see that this session. And there's usually some debate and some last-minute tweaks when they get into a session from the work that they've done, that they kind of finished up in the fall. So that'll definitely be one thing that they'll try to address, and I think they'll try to address that fairly quickly in the session this time.
Yeah, you were on the House side, and of course, and one of the things that a lot of observers have noticed it's inescapable that there's some tensions among the Republican caucus on the other side of the Capitol, on the south side of the Capitol, on the Senate. There seem to be some personality conflicts down there.
Yes, sir. And, I think that that's always kind of been the case. Not everybody gets along, but with social media and some of the other outlets that are at the disposal of the members now, I think some of those things may become more public. But the Senate's always been really good about when the bell rings and the session starts, they find a way to come together. And they form a pretty close-knit fraternity. And so I look for that to probably be the case again. I mean, obviously there's going to be some divisions that, like we've referenced earlier from, geography and from their districts and things. But I would say more often than not, they come together and approach things as a unit. They just seem to always find a way to do that, and probably look for that to happen this time as well. Maybe not as cohesive as they have been, but they'll find a way. And I think Senate President Hickey will find a way to bring them all together when it really counts.
Well, eventually everybody wants to go home at the end of the session.
Yes, sir.
Steve Barnes again with former Arkansas Speaker Jeremy Gillum. We are going to return to the House floor momentarily. A delegation has been dispatched by Speaker Matt Shepard to summon the governor, to escort the governor to the House chamber. And we will be switching back there in time, plenty of time for Mr. Hutchinson's address to the General Assembly. As the Speaker has noted, as we've noted here, it will be an address that's unlike any other, I guess, Jeremy, in our time, owing to the health precautions that have had to be installed in both chambers, certainly in the House chamber, which will be the most conspicuous for our viewers here.
Definitely will have a different feel, I think, in the room, for the governor, and as he's able to lay out his vision for the session. And for the members as well. They're used to having the Senate there. They're used to having the constitutional officers of the Supreme Court and everybody in attendance. And so it'll be a different feel, but at the end, the result will be they'll hear the governor's charge, and I think they'll take up those call to arms and be ready to commence in earnest the committee process, and the bill filing will continue to, I think, have a flurry of action over the next few days as well.
Looks like we are in a roll call at this particular moment. Yeah. So we would expect to hear from the Speaker just any second now. Now there's one of one of the pillars of the House of Representatives, Mr. Speaker, and that's the gentleman who is on the right up there at the top of the dais.
He is just a great man, been a great friend. Buddy Johnson's done a marvelous job as the parliamentarian, and had years to study from, an institution in and of himself, and Mr. Massinelli and Boss and his years
the late
there.
Tim Massinelli.
Yes, and so both those gentlemen have served that institution in this state with honor and integrity, and very glad to have had a chance to serve with both of them.
And I think back on the floor now, we're another invocation.
Friends, would you join me in prayer, please? Our Father, we remember the psalmist who said, "Blessed be God who has not rejected our prayer." We thank you that you hear us when we pray, and we thank you for the privilege of interceding today on behalf of the men and women who serve the citizens of Arkansas in both chambers here, to give you thanks for the President Pro Tem, to give you thanks for our Speaker, Matthew Shepard, and especially for our Governor and our First Lady. We pray you'll continue to bless our Governor with strength, with courage, with wisdom that's needed for this day. Father, may we all, as we think about the privileges and blessings of life, use the time here in this session as an opportunity of service. And as we look back over the term of the session, the term of life, that we might look upon it as a stewardship of the days, the months, the years that you grant us upon this earth. Thank you for every blessing. We know that every good and perfect gift comes from you, and that includes the gift of friendship, the gift of citizenship, and the opportunity to serve. Bless this session in Jesus' name. Amen.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I would like to recognize the First Lady of Arkansas, Susan Hutchinson, and the Governor's Chief of Staff, Allison Williams. Mr. Parliamentarian, you're recognized to announce the results of the general election vote for the United States Senate, the United States Congress, proposed constitutional amendments, and ballot issues.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The following results, you may be seated, please. The following results are certified by our Secretary of State, the Honorable John Thurston. For the U.S. Senate, Ricky Dale Harrington, 399,390 votes. Senator Tom Cotton, 793,871 votes. U.S. House of Representatives, District Number 1, Congressman Rick Crawford, 237,596 votes. He was unopposed. U.S. House of Representatives, District 2, Senator Joyce Elliott, 148,410. Congressman French Hill, 184,093 votes. U.S. House of Representatives, District Number 3, Michael J. Kalagas, 12,977 votes. Celeste Williams, 106,325 votes. Congressman Steve Womack, 214,960 votes. U.S. House of Representatives, District 4, Frank Gilbert, 7,668 votes. William H. Hanson, 75,750 votes. Representative Bruce Westerman, 191,617 votes. The ballot issues. Issue number 1, an amendment to the Arkansas Constitution continuing a 0.5% sales and use tax for state highways and bridges, county roads, bridges, and other surface transportation, and city streets, bridges, and other surface transportation after retirement of the bonds authorized in the Arkansas Constitution.
And again, a bit of the ritual, pro forma stuff that has to, that typically begins every regular session of the General Assembly. Steve Barnes again here with former Speaker Jeremy Gillum. I think in just a moment here, the Speaker will formally appoint a committee to escort the governor to the House chamber. Governor's not supposed to come into the House chamber. I mean, there's a division there without the permission of the body.
They'll send a committee to go escort him upon invitation into the chamber, and there's it's separation of powers.
Absolutely.
Got the formalities that have to be adhered to. So.
Yeah, the niceties, usually about an 8 or 10 member committee. They've already been appointed, but there's sort of a bit of ceremony that goes with that, and we'll hear from Mr. Hutchinson in just a moment. Back on the matter of fiscal policy, Jeremy, we're looking at a situation in which much of the tax legislation of the last really 15 years or so has been made possible by the Medicaid expansion. It has poured literally billions of dollars into the state treasury.
It has, and that was one of the things when the private option was adopted, that was a key part of the debate among the Republican caucus, among the Democratic caucus, was in both the House and the Senate. It was, what that impact would be, and was that sufficient enough to take that step and institute the program, and continues to be a key factor in the debate moving forward. And as we were discussing earlier, whatever modifications that comes about with Arkansas Works, that's going to continue to be a key part of the discussion. Is that the budget hole that it creates from a state standpoint, but also the dominoes and the ripple effect that it would have among services without those federal dollars coming through, and how you replace those. And so that's definitely going to be a part of the discussion. No.
Yeah, and particularly the potential impact anyway, on rural health care, strained even now,
yes.
And particularly so under COVID. Even the big urban hospitals are as well. But it is credited with keeping at least some rural hospitals open over the last decade.
Well, and I think that's going to be, you referenced where we're at now with COVID. I mean, I think that's going to be a key factor in the members' minds as they have these discussions and the debates, is now really the time to make any significant changes? Could you, in the middle of a pandemic, just systematically overhaul something like that? And so I think that it will add in something to the equation that probably a year ago, as they were thinking ahead to the debate, wasn't a factor. And I think now, and that very well may change some votes. Timing is everything, and that may be, that external variable coming in with COVID may really change a lot of people's minds as far as what they do right now.
Always, it seems, in any legislative session, there is, using the broad brush of social legislation, intensely emotional issues, and abortion is almost always at the top of the list of those issues that really can animate the dialogue. But with the Republican Party now with supermajorities in both chambers, and the pro-life stance being such a part of the Republican platform, it would seem that there's not much room for the pro-choice crowd left.
No, not in Arkansas. And I think when you look at the polling throughout the state, everybody has definitely signaled, I think, to the state and to their members and legislators that's where they want things to go. And I think that's where you're going to see the legislation pass overwhelmingly through the House and the Senate.
Right. And here we have Governor Hutchinson entering the chamber, escorted, of course, by the legislative delegation appointed by the Speaker. There will be another moment of recognition for Mr. Hutchinson, and then we will hear his plan for this General Assembly.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, may I proceed? Thank you, Speaker Shepard, and to Senate Pro Tem Jimmy Hickey, and to the honorable members of the General Assembly. Thank you for that warm greeting. Let me assure you that is gratefully received, and hopefully that signals a strong relationship as we enter this session. I also welcome those members joining from the Senate chambers and those that are joining from the public. First, let me extend my congratulations to the new members. By my count, we have over 20 members newly elected in this session, and for some it is a return in a new role, and for many others, this will be your first regular session. Well, as you will remember, when I was elected governor, we hit the ground running, and we did not intend to slow down. So buckle your seatbelt, because we've got a lot of work to do. Now, this marks my 7th year as governor, and today will be the last time that I address the General Assembly in regular session. Thank you for not applauding on that last line. Today, we begin this session with historic challenges besetting our nation. We're beginning the 11th month of a global pandemic that has impacted every aspect of life, from losing friends and loved ones, to increased unemployment needs, to changes in education, healthcare, community events, and even in this legislative session. Our life is different today. And then last week, we witnessed a violent mob assault our nation's capital when they breached our Article 1 branch of government. They attacked the foundations of our democracy. And let me say clearly that each person who breached the heart of our democracy must be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. A presidential election often divides the country along political and cultural lines, and I understand the passion. It is okay to be passionate, but we must not let passion cloud our common sense and our commitment to our state and nation. And when the election is over, then we need to come together, united to strengthen our democracy and heal our land. As we enter this session, I ask you to take the long look through the perspective of time. How do we want history to remember this session? Will it be one that brought people together, or did we just add more fuel to the flames of division? We all have our political principles and convictions, and we dare not abandon those. But we can still find solutions and ways to work together for the common good. Some people look at the upcoming session and predict that it will be acrimonious and accomplish little. I wholeheartedly disagree with that assessment. I expect us to meet the challenge of the moment and to pass legislation that will give our healthcare workers and public the tools needed to defeat the coronavirus. I expect legislation that will boost our economy. We need laws that will assure that our police officers have the highest standards, are fully trained, funded, and supported. And yes, we want laws to increase accountability and oversight as well. And we must take action to reward our teachers who make a difference every day for the next generation. This session will also build on the accomplishments of the past. In each regular session, we have lowered taxes on hardworking Arkansans. And this year, the individual income tax rate has been reduced to 5.9%. In total, as a result of all of our income tax cuts, we have moved $800 million from the government checkbook into hands of individuals across our state. And because of your efforts, we have raised the pay of our dedicated teachers in our public schools, and we have become a nationally recognized leader in computer science education. We have, for the first time, devoted state resources to expand high-speed internet in unreached areas of our state. $86.8 million has been invested in the Rural Connect grant program. This has provided internet access to over 70,000 Arkansans who previously lacked service. This is progress. We equalized our sales tax collections so that online transactions are treated the same as sales from our Main Street small businesses, and those small businesses are the lifeblood of our communities. The legislation that you passed allowed our cities and counties to survive through the pandemic. Thank you. We have worked hard to make state government more efficient, and the result is that 1,700 fewer state employees are employed in state government than in 2015. This is estimated to be an annual savings of $77 million each year. And so today, despite the crosswinds of a national economy that is struggling, we are beginning this session in the best budget position in more than a decade. The state right now has an unallocated surplus of over $200 million. And after 6 months into our current budget year, we have exceeded our revenue forecast by more than $300 million. So the state of our state finances is strong. And our state budget reflects a resilient state economy in which the private sector continues to create jobs. And I have never been more proud of Arkansans. We are still all determined to come through this healthcare crisis stronger and more hopeful than ever. And while we have been focused on our healthcare emergency, my administration continues to do the work of job creation. Despite the limitations on travel, companies have moved or expanded in Arkansas over the last year, creating more than 2,200 new jobs and invested over $800 million this last year. These jobs and investments are the result of incentives and signed agreements by our economic development teams. It has been exciting for me to help celebrate some of these job announcements, from Synergy Cargo in Crossett, to Emerson Motors in Ash Flat, from Nice Pack in Jonesboro, to Hytrol in Fort Smith, to name just a few. Thank you for supporting the economic incentives that have been critical to closing many of these investments. Even with the challenges of the pandemic, we have over 53,000 more Arkansans employed today than in January of 2015. Most importantly, we have supported our farmers and ranchers with reduced regulation and efforts to expand market opportunities. And while our tourism and hospitality industry have struggled, they continue to be a foundational part of our economy. They might need more help. We will be there for them. Now let me address the upcoming session. Our first responsibility is to act on the healthcare emergency that faces our state. The General Assembly has been an essential and effective partner during the last 11 months. Without your action, we would not have built a grant program for small businesses. Without your help, we would not have provided enhanced benefits to the unemployed, or additional funds for food assistance and rental assistance. And without your work, we would not have been successful in building the healthcare infrastructure to fight coronavirus today. So on behalf of the people of Arkansas, I thank you for your work through the Legislative Council and through your own actions in meeting the needs of our citizens. And now is not the time to withdraw from the battle. We must not be faint of heart, but we must keep fighting and not call for retreat as some would advocate. The current emergency rules are in place until February 27. And prior to that date, you need to act. I trust you will both affirm the emergency and continue the emergency rules that have proven necessary during this healthcare crisis. These include our telemedicine rules, our educational waivers, our immunity liability for business and healthcare workers, and other important life-saving measures. If you do not act, these measures will end. As part of our pandemic response, I'm asking the General Assembly to pass appropriations to allow federal COVID relief funds, which have been granted by Congress, sent to the states, to be spent on getting the vaccines more quickly and into the arms of more Arkansans. We need health department infrastructure to coordinate and administer the coronavirus vaccines. We need a continued investment in testing. We need stable funding for contact tracing and support for our K-12 education and higher education. All of these investments require major appropriations and actions on your part. When it comes to our public schools, I support another round of increased pay for teachers. My goal is to raise average teacher salaries by $2,000 over the next 2 years. You have already signaled your support to raise teacher pay. You've paved the way, you've led the way, and we can work together to accomplish this goal. Now, let me move to a more difficult subject. Let me read portions of a couple of letters I have received on a topic that has already generated some discussion: hate crimes legislation. My only request is that you listen and make your own judgment on the merits and fairness of the bill. From Jimmy D. Warren of Conway, who writes in support of hate crime legislation in Arkansas. Quote, Arkansas has always been on the forefront of leading on important issues, with this being an important and an opportunity to take a stand against actors who clearly represent the worst of crimes that are against people for their identity. This legislation is important not just for economic development, but it demonstrates that Arkansas is no place for racism and discrimination. From Rabbi Barry Block of Congregation B'nai Israel in Little Rock. As a people historically targeted with horrific hate crimes, the Jewish community well understands the importance of hate crime legislation. Arkansans would be safer if such hateful and heinous criminals faced sentence enhancement on the basis of their animus-motivated crimes. He goes on to say, adopting this legislation will enhance Arkansas's reputation, much to the credit of the General Assembly. From IBM plans to engage Arkansas business and community leaders to ensure that all reasonable measures are considered to get hate crime legislation enacted on a bipartisan basis. The time to act is now. The swift passage of Georgia's hate crime law shows that the moment has come. The status quo is unacceptable. We look forward to working with the state legislature to pass a hate crime law in Arkansas. And from 50 for the Future President Scott Kopis from here in Little Rock. Not only is hate crime legislation the right thing to do morally, failure to pass a bill will leave Arkansas as only one of 3 states without such a law. This would negatively impact our ability to recruit and retain employers and talent, as it will result in a black eye for Arkansas on a national scale that will cripple our economic development efforts for years to come, end quote. I could read scores of letters, but let me make another point. The main objection that I hear from my conservative friends is that it gives some people more protection than others. Or it has been phrased, if you're going to do it for one group of people, why wouldn't you do it for another? This legislation applies equally. If you are Hispanic and you are targeted, it applies. If you're Jewish, it applies. If you're a Caucasian, it applies. Or African American or any other race, it applies equally. It enhances the penalty for targeting regardless of the race that is targeted. I've talked to a broad range of people across Arkansas about hate crimes, and they all express a sincere conviction, whether for or against it. And the only way we can come together on this issue is for us to listen to each other and to step into others' shoes who live in a different world than ours. When we do this, then we can come together and find the best solution. Many of you ask that I not have a special session of the legislature for hate crimes. I respected your request, and we are here today, and the time to act is now. Polls show that a clear majority of Republicans, Democrats, and independents support passage of this kind of legislation. Let's not be the last to enact it, but let's lead and do what is important for so many. In each general session, while I have been governor, we have also supported children suffering from abuse, increased our support for foster children, and we have passed pro-life legislation, and now we're the #1 pro-life state in the nation. And I want to acknowledge the First Lady who is here, my wife Susan of 47 years. And she has worked hard to protect the children of our state. And I can't think of a greater responsibility than to protect our children. And I look forward to working with you to make sure we do all we can to take care of the most vulnerable among us. 6 years ago, when we started cutting the income tax rate in Arkansas, there were many who said we were going to become just like Kansas. They warned that it would be a financial catastrophe to cut taxes. And yet, because of our measured approach and our emphasis upon private sector growth, we have lowered taxes, fully funded K-12 education, increased funding for higher education, and created not only a surplus, but the first long-term reserve fund in history. And now we are poised to do more. I have set aside $100 million in my proposed budget for the long-term reserve fund increase. And we have set aside over $50 million for tax cuts for middle and lower income Arkansans. Let's work together to determine the best way to get this done. But I have asked for 2 specific tax cuts proposals as part of the package. Let's reduce the sales tax on used cars that sell from $4,000 to $10,000. Currently, the sales tax rate is 6.5%. We can reduce that to 3.5% and give relief to thousands of Arkansans who depend upon used vehicles for getting to work and school. Let's do that together. But to pay for tax cuts, we need to continue to grow our economy and bring people to Arkansas. If we can lower our tax rate for new residents to 4.9% for 5 years, then we will attract new Arkansans who will create jobs, spend money, and pay taxes. You say, well, how do you know this? I know it because we've done it. By just lowering our tax rate to 5.9%, we have seen people return to our state and invest in our future. According to one study, Arkansas ranked number 10 in the nation for the number of people moving in to our state. And it sets a goal for us as well, to lower our tax rate in a similar way for all citizens. And if we don't get there, the tax break for new residents will sunset, but we can get there together. I'm also asking for support to expand high-speed internet into more rural areas of our state. We have to reduce the digital divide. We have to provide education fairly in all areas of our state. And it takes high-speed internet to do this and so much more, from improving the quality of life to attracting businesses and entrepreneurs. I have set aside $30 million for this purpose in our proposed budget. If we can, let's do more. It is such a great need for our state. And when it comes to our success in computer science education, I ask you to support legislation that will require a computer science course as a graduation credit. And yes, we will have to increase the training of our teachers even more, but we are ready to do it because it gives our young people even greater opportunities right here in Arkansas. It is an honor to serve the people of this state. Usually during a legislative session, there is nothing else but the session on my mind. That consumes my time and energy. This year, it's a little different because of the need to get vaccinations out to the millions of Arkansans that are waiting. I'm intentionally devoting a great deal of my time to that effort, but my door is open to you. Anytime we can work together, anytime you want an audience, anytime you want to share an idea, let's visit. And let me end with a story today. When I was 17 years of age, on April 4, 1968, Senator Robert Kennedy was told of the news that Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. He broke the earth-shattering news to the mostly black audience he was scheduled to address in Indianapolis. He said these words: "What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence or lawlessness, but love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice towards those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or be black." Those words ring true more than 50 years later, but our prayer is the same. Let's pray for our nation, our leaders, and pray for understanding, wisdom, and let us pursue justice for all Americans. May God bless the United States, the state of Arkansas, and your work in the coming days. Thank you.
Steve Barnes back in Arkansas PBS headquarters with former Arkansas Speaker Jeremy Gillum. A bit of a surprise, Mr. Speaker. I didn't put a stopwatch on it, but I think the governor took about 20 minutes on that address. A bit of a surprise up top. Obviously, the first reference was to COVID-19 and how it has completely redrawn, altered the landscape in every respect in Arkansas. But there was a very early reference to the January 6th spectacle at the U.S. Capitol and a plea that any such thing be avoided here.
I thought he did a great job at setting a tone for the session in the speech, but at the very beginning addressing what happened last week, and I thought trying to remind everyone you know, of the need for unity and a common purpose. And so I thought he did a great job of setting that stage, addressing, you know, the pandemic, the political climate we're in right now, and then being able to use that moving forward to lay out the vision. So I thought it was a great speech, and I thought he did a great job on his tone for the moment.
Yeah, two parallel problems, and that's the political climate and the COVID. Just as quickly as he almost just as quickly as he mentioned the assault on the U.S. Capitol last week, he said this is no time to defund the police. We need an adequately funded and trained and accountable police force. And I think he mentioned also that the study commission, which he created to study police accountability in Arkansas.
He, as he does with most of the issues that he tackles, he's looking at it from a comprehensive approach. It's not just a quick one-size-fits-all bumper sticker type slogan. He wants to. He laid it out today that he wanted to address it and deal with it in a comprehensive manner. The training, the funding, all of those things, coupled with oversight, as he mentioned, to produce a more robust law enforcement force, and I think that was evident in the tone and the words that he chose today.
On the matter of hate crimes legislation, just threw it right out there, acknowledged what everyone knows. It is going to be a very controversial issue. I noticed that the governor spoke of the hate crimes legislation in terms only of race and ethnicity, making no mention of sexual orientation or gender identity, which it is believed are the real trouble spots in the legislation.
Yes, and that could have been from just communication that he received. I mean, he did read some letters, and so you know, I'm not positive maybe on the omission there, if that was because of him staying with the tone and the theme of the letters that he received and keeping that in the speech or not. But that will be addressed in the discussion and the debate moving forward. As you said, that's been out there. I mean, people have already commented on that, maybe a hang-up they had with the legislation. So that'll be part of the process when it works through the committee system and the floors.
Yeah. What else caught your ear, Jeremy?
I thought, for me personally, I thought, you know, his focus on broadband, you know, tying that in with the importance that it now plays with education and with economic development, which we already knew that as far as the economic development side of things, but he really, I thought, tied in education and equity in education now with technology and making sure that broadband was more prolific throughout the state. That was something that I had worked on for years when I was in the House, and so that really caught my attention, and especially that tie with education, and because we've seen through this pandemic how that has become extremely vital, and there is a divide there with areas that do not have it versus those that do.
A real rural-urban divide on that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and there was also this too, a statutory requirement for computer education for a high school diploma or a GED, presumably.
Yes, and of course that's been something he's been laying the groundwork for since he became governor. It's been a passion of his, and it's been something that has brought a lot of success to the state because of that, and so I think he really wants to continue that, and I think he's got a lot of willing partners there in that. I think there's been a lot of members that have seen the significance of that. I think those in education have seen the significance of it, and I think the private sector has for sure seen the impact that can make if we can progress that even further with his new proposal as well.
Yeah, and in terms of education / fiscal policy, he wants an average $2,000 pay raise for classroom teachers over 2 years.
I think that just goes back to our discussion earlier too, and the fact that you know, he definitely has been one to want to invest in education, and this is a way to do it in the people that fuel the education infrastructure and teachers, and so I think he'll have a lot of willing partners there in the General Assembly. It's something Senator Alan Clark and others have been championing for years, and so I think he'll have a lot of partners in that initiative as well.
Yeah, and on tax policy, again, reference to his hope to get the top rate down, as we talked about, in a slow, steady, responsible manner, but also his proposal to exempt from the income tax, or to grant a lower income tax to new arrivals for 5 years. That one didn't get quite the reception that he'd hoped for.
No, and when he laid that out in the fall, it didn't really catch a lot of traction at that point either. And so that one will be one that will be interesting to see how it develops through the process over the next couple of months. And there just doesn't seem to be a lot of support for that. But, you know, he also really highlighted, too, the long-term reserve fund, and that is something that did get a good response, both in the fall and today as well, and the implications that has for our overall budget, bond ratings and things. And so, you know, there was definitely some things there that I think the members are really excited about, and some that, you know, they didn't quite cheer on as much, but that's part of the process, and they'll have those discussions and debates, and I'm sure they'll be rigorous and robust as they always are.
Well, we mentioned that earlier in the broadcast that the Constitution requires a session to go at least 60 days. Maybe in the 19th century they were able to pull that off, but not in recent decades anyway, at least to this reporter's memory. If you had to guess, what are we looking at?
Well, I think a lot of it will be dictated on when the census numbers come in and COVID. I think those are the two great variables that face the Speaker and the Senate President right now as they're moving this session forward. Are they going to have to stop and take a short recess because of COVID numbers and maybe a spike? Not just among the members, but you've also got the fantastic men and women that serve in support roles, the staff, both the Bureau of Legislative Research and then their respective chamber staff. So there may be issues there that cause some delays. But I think from just an efficiency standpoint, a lot of that also be dictated on the number of bills that are filed. There's been a lot of predictions that there would be fewer bills filed this time as far as non-budget, substantive legislation. So if that's the case, that may move things a little quicker as well. And then you've got the variable of the redistricting numbers coming from the census. And if those are delayed indefinitely, they may have to make some alterations there as far as the schedule for moving forward.
Right, and don't want to overlook this too, and there's a significant source of tension between the executive and the legislative branches, and that's the emergency powers granted the governor by the last General Assembly, which he made clear he wants renewed.
He did, and I think they, going into it, expect there to be a fairly good debate on that as well. And there's multiple camps within the House and the Senate on how to approach that. So even those that want more legislative input, there's a lot of debate even amongst themselves on what does that really look like? Can we be nimble enough to be a partner in the process and still be able to protect the state, because it's a lot of members, the logistics are different, qualifications, experience, skill sets they bring in are different. So it's not even unified even among the legislature on what that would look like as far as their role in that process. And so definitely one to look for moving through the session to see how that unfolds.
Former Speaker Jeremy Gillum, thanks for being here. Thanks for adding your insights.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
All right. Maybe in 2 years.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you for joining us. For all of us at Arkansas PBS, have a great day.
AETN now returns to its regularly scheduled programming, already in progress.
Love it. It's sort of like the ones that grow at the big pond. I wonder if these eat bugs too.